Welcome to All the Fanfare. My name is Eric Pierce. Today we're talking about The Legend of Zelda for the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, which came out in the 1980s and was probably my first true video game love. I was addicted to this game and I recently replayed it because this is hot nerd summer and I've been playing a lot of the retro games that I grew up loving. So far, I'm 2 for 2 on replaying some of the classic games of my childhood and finding that they still hold up really well. I had a pod a couple weeks ago talking about Tecmo Super Bowl and how that is quite possibly the best NES game and certainly, in my opinion, the best sports game. This week, we're talking about Legend of Zelda, which is when I think about gaming when I was a kid, this game is always in the mix as far as games I think of. Legend of Zelda, Tecmo Super Bowl, Baseball Stars, or Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, those kinds of games. But like I said, this was my first true video game love. I have memories of sitting on the floor in front of our giant console television with the map spread on the floor, tracking my progress across the world and discovering all the secrets and wonderful memories. And the game really holds up. This for the last couple of weeks I've been replaying it and I beat it in about 15 or 20 hours, and they were 15 or 20 magical hours. And when you beat the game, you have the option to replay it, which I said yes. I'll have a second serving. It's kind of like ice cream. Like, yeah, I'll have that second scoop. So it's early days, and it changes things up. The first map the first dungeon I went to, some of the monsters were different and quite a bit harder. So it'll be interesting to see how that second play goes. And I don't know if I'll actually finish it, but as for the first playthrough, I just loved it. What a trip down memory lane. A lot of things I want to talk about with this game. Before I get to that, just want to briefly mention, if you love the podcast, if you just enjoy the podcast, you don't have to love it, but if you enjoy the podcast, I'd appreciate the support. Head over to allthefanfare.com. You can support the pod for $3 a month. And with your $3 a month subscription, you will gain access to a bevy of exclusive articles on all kinds of topics: gaming, movies, television, a lot of Star Wars. I'm going to be real. I talk about Star Wars a lot, so there's a lot of that out there. There's over 30 articles on allthefanfare.com right now that are exclusive to paid members that you'll find nowhere else. So just a quick plug. If you like the pod, that's the easiest and best way to indicate that you like this kind of madness. So back to this game, The Legend of Zelda. So for those of you that played this game in the 80s, you'll remember that the Nintendo cartridges were always this kind of matte gray, just plain looking. The Legend of Zelda's cartridge was special because it was gold plated, and that was an all-time flex and a signal that, yeah, this game is special. It almost, evoked kind of a treasure thing, which fits the game because a lot of what you do in the game is you're discovering secrets and magical items and things, and it just kind of feeds into that whole, like, yeah, you're finding magical treasure. And I just like that the game itself was a signal of that. The music in this game is iconic. Dun 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 dun. It just keeps going. It's so good, and it is repetitive. It probably repeats itself after like a minute, and I'll be honest, like, it never bothered me. I loved it. Now, I will also be honest. My wife was sitting on the couch next to me one night when I was playing, and she's like, "Can you turn that down or mute it or something because it's driving me crazy?" Because it is repetitive, and I can see how, yeah, if you're not playing the game, it would maybe grate on your nerves a little bit. Now, at the same time, I was in a dungeon at that time, and the music changes something a little creepier when you're exploring dungeons, and so I kind of get why it doesn't have the heroic kind of vibe, the upbeat tone of the overworld music. But even that, I was in for it. So, but I did mute it because I'm a good husband, or try to be. Speaking of sound effects, or just sound, the sound effect that plays when you discover a secret in the game, by bombing a wall and discovering a door hidden behind it, or burning a bush and discovering there's stairs underneath this bush, or pushing a block or whatever. There's lots of secrets and things going through waterfall. There's all kinds of areas you can discover in this game through a careful interaction with the environment. And the when you discover a secret, it's pretty much undefeated when it comes to that whole you found something, you went off the beaten path and found something sweet. And that never got old. Even through this whole playthrough, you get that the thrill of excitement when you discover something, and the sound effect that goes with that is just great. I don't know if this is true because I did no research for this topic. The research I did was just play the game again and just think about what it was like played again. I kind of feel like this might be the very first open world game. You're just when you start the game, you're just dropped, literally like dropped into the map. You are standing with a shield outside of a cave, a very obvious looking cave, and you go into the cave because it's the obvious thing to do and it looks interesting, intriguing. And there's an old man in there and he's like, "Hey, here's a sword, you know, go do your thing." If you don't go in the cave first, then it means you're running around the world with a shield and no way to really protect yourself from the monsters and things that are out there. In a very retro way that's also timeless. This game is about exploration and discovery. Like that actually is the game. When the game starts, you're really not given like a mandate like, oh, go save the princess or go do that. Now granted, games back in the day used to come with big manuals, and that probably was covered in the manual, but just jumping into the game without reading a manual or anything, like I just did a couple weeks ago and have been doing, you have no direction, you have no objective, you're just on a map in a world, and you just start wandering around discovering things like, oh, like, okay, this looks cool, this looks interesting, I'm gonna go check this out, I'm gonna go check that out. And it all is, like I said, it's very retro, very cool. And in that retro vibe, I resisted the urge to do any Googling when I was stuck, because that was how you played. There was no internet. There was no Google back in the 80s or early 90s when I was playing this. If you were stuck, your options were ask your friends who maybe have played the game and have gotten further than you. And that was how you discovered some secrets, clearly through word of mouth. And if failing that, though, you just figured it out. You played the game for hours on end and you checked everything out, and eventually you discover things. And that's a lost art. That's something that most games don't have anymore. You play any of the modern Legend of Zeldas, there's a very clear quest that you're pursuing. You're given directions before you're shoved out the door into the open world. Well, this game doesn't have any of that. You're just a kindly old man gives you a sword and is like, peace out, good luck. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. Flip side of that is it's super easy to get over your head in this game. So the dungeons, there's 8 of them, plus the final dungeon where Ganon, the end boss, is holding Zelda, which you don't know because no one ever tells you in the game. So there's 9 total dungeons. But I ended up, so they're spread around the world in kind of a, I don't want to say random fashion, but it's not like you discover 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Like you just discover them when you're exploring. And so the order I played the dungeons, I believe that's correct. Dungeon 1, 3, 4, 5, 2, 7, 8, 6. That was the order that I defeated the dungeons. Most of those were like in the very first playthrough, I defeated them. The 6th dungeon kicked my butt, which is why I kind of just went away for a while, and then accidentally sort of finished dungeon 7 and 8 before I went back to it. So that's just how that went. And then I had some fun trying to find the Skull Mountain Ganon dungeon. It's not on the map anywhere, and I'm not going to spoil it in case you want to go back and play this game that's, almost 40 years old. But it took me some doing to figure out, and I did it. And it felt, there was a sense of accomplishment and achievement that I don't get out of a lot of games that do more hand-holding and with the story. Because, again, the point of this game really is in discovery and exploration, and that's where the magic lies. And so if you do play this, I would encourage you, don't look anything up. Just figure it out as you go. I did Google briefly to find out what some of the items were because I bought something and I had no idea how to use it. And It was like a snack. I kind of wish I hadn't done that because I got a glimpse of something and knew what to do with it later on. But other than that, I did no googling, and the game was all the better for that. So in case you haven't played this, the game, you're kind of looking top down on your character, who's Link. He's an elf in green. So you're see that everything you see on the screen is one area of the overland map, and then when you go off the screen to the left, right, or or bottom, the screen then scrolls in that direction and reveals a different area of the map, and so that's how you're exploring the world. And then likewise, when you go into dungeons, everything on the screen is like one room of the dungeon, and then you go through a doorway or something, the screen scrolls to that direction and you're in a different area. And let me tell you, like, it's just as for the technology of the time, it's again, I think this is maybe the first open world game. It's certainly the first open world game I can remember, and it's just so satisfying exploring and just discovering things, going off the beaten path. And technically, there is no path, so everything's off the beaten path in this game. You're just kind of wandering around trying to figure things out. The dungeons themselves each has their own unique monsters, layout, and challenges, and oftentimes within each dungeon, you would find a magic item or just an item that you would then use to progress in the dungeon. You would need to use that item against the end boss, typically. But then also in the overland world, like you would come across things that you couldn't reach. Along the coast, there's a heart that's like just out of reach. You can't get to it. Well, shortly after you get like a step ladder or something, and then you can get to that heart, and then that's how you pick it up. But this is one of those things where you see this stuff in the world because you're just wandering around. You're like, I wonder how I get to that. And later on, you find just the thing, and like, okay, sweet, now I can go pick up that heart. Uh, just great stuff. The end bosses in the dungeons were all different, unique, challenging in their own ways. And some of them actually show up again later as sub bosses, like specifically in like the later dungeons, like 7, 8, 9. It's a nice barometer for like how far you've progressed as a hero when you see a villain that maybe kicked your butt a little bit in dungeon 3 or 4, and then he pops up in dungeon 8 and you just wipe the floor with him. It's just a nice indicator of like, yeah, I'm a lot better now. I'm a lot stronger. The dungeons, just like the overland map, there's a satisfaction to exploring them because there's a lot of hidden things. You have like smoke bombs in this game when you put them up against the wall, and you can blow holes in the wall. If there's a hidden doorway there, you'll discover it through the use of a bomb. There are blocks you can push that will reveal hidden staircases, and it's so satisfying. Like, even so, like I said, I played through this game, and I may play through it again, and it's one of those things that just never gets old. Just the satisfaction of pushing the block and hearing the da da da, and then seeing the stairs. It's very kind of Indiana Jones, like, yeah, we're just going through this dungeon and finding cool things, and it's just a lot of fun. So within each dungeon, you'll find an end boss that's guarding a piece of the Triforce, and kind of your objective is to find all these pieces of the Triforce so that you can get into the final dungeon and fight Ganon. And then also when you defeat the each end boss of that dungeon, you'll get another heart to increase your lifespan. Well, within each dungeon, there's a compass and a map of of that unique dungeon. The compass indicates to you, where in this dungeon is the end boss. And then the map is just like a room by room, like this is what the dungeon looks like. It's a freaking map, right? Well, the part of the fun with the exploring the dungeons is looking at the map and being like, well, there's a strange empty area on this map that probably indicates a secret room. And then sure enough, you go over there and you start bombing walls, pushing on blocks, and chances are you'll find that secret room. And a lot of times there's treasure in there or something, maybe a secret. A lot of times an old man, always the old man pops up and it's like, hey, watch out for this, or shoot the end boss with that, or, those kinds of things. Just little pointers. This game had a save system, which was unique at the time. And I remember so coming into like a game like this, I primarily played stuff like Mario. Save state wasn't really a thing. Like, you played a game until you died, and then you had to start all over. So like in Mario, you're forever starting over at world 1-1 and until you beat it. Like that's the game, and that's the way the game's played, and there's, it's fun. But I prefer games like this where they maintain your progress, and so you're not always starting over at 0 or 1, because you keep a sense of momentum. Like every time you play, you're picking up where you left off, and it feels like you're achieving something. And I think that's crucial for this game, and part of what makes it such a legendary game. The Legend of Zelda is a legendary game. Who would have known? It was right in the name. The items in this game each are unique, and a lot of them are kind of single use. You get the boomerang, probably the best item in the game, because you can fling it out, and if there's coins or hearts that are just scattered around from enemies you defeated, it'll pick them up and grab them for you. It'll also stun most of the enemies, which is kind of nice because, the enemies are everywhere. So you can stun them so you can quickly kill them. Boomerang's probably my favorite weapon. I've talked a bit about the bombs. Those are awesome because it's how you discover a lot of secrets in this game. There's a candle you can use to burn bushes and discover secrets and light up. Some of the dungeon levels are dark, so you need a candle to cast some light on the subject. There's a bow and arrow. The bow and arrow is a little disappointing, I'll be honest. It's a classic kind of fantasy weapon, and not the stereotype, but you are playing in like a forest elf, and so naturally you're gonna have a bow. But it's just okay for the most part. I just always left it in my pack. Like I didn't get it out very often. Wizard staff is pretty cool, especially when you level it up later on. And then there's some utility items you find, like rings that make you take less damage. There's a bracelet that allows you to push heavy rocks and discover certain areas. There's like a raft, and there's all kinds of other things. Each one feels unique, and it's super satisfying when you discover these things, because like gaining hearts and increasing the health that your character has, the items are another way of indicating like, oh, how much you've progressed, to the point where when I finished this game and they offer you the chance to start over and the world's slightly different, which I took, I felt naked because you start off with your crappy shield, no sword, and all your items are gone. You're back down to 3 hearts. I never felt as naked as I did when I restarted the campaign after beating it and then losing all my items, everything I had worked so hard to get. It's kind of demoralizing. And then I go into the first dungeon and I just got wiped across the floor. They worked me. So yeah, it's a cool way of indicating like how much you progress, I guess. The gameplay itself is simple and addicting. You're just running around, again, kind of top-down view, and you're fighting enemies. You've got a shield to block projectiles coming at you, which you can level up by buying an expensive one. And then you've got your sword to stab things, and when you're full health, you'll actually throw swords, which is cool. Enemies move around without a real clear pattern, so it remains challenging even once you're fully souped up with hearts and items and stuff. It still remains challenging. You'll still get bumped by things and lose your hearts because the enemies will surprise you. Even some of the easier ones, sometimes they can get the drop on you. I don't know the names of any of the monsters because I didn't look up anything, and I don't have the instruction manual to this game anymore. So I just can tell you that the enemies I hated the most were the blue knights. So there's these knights that walk around in the dungeons, and they have shields, and you can only damage them if you don't attack them from the front. So if you attack them from the side or the back, you can do damage to them. Sounds easy, but these guys like turn on a heel constantly, and they just like beeline it for you, and every time they run into you, you take damage. I hated those guys, and of course, naturally, the game would like put you in rooms with like 5 or 6 of these guys. And there was one room, I think in Dungeon 8, where you were in a room with 6 of these guys roaming around, and then there were statues spitting fireballs and like at you, and that was a hairy battle. You're just running around trying not to get clotheslined by these guys, and again, fireballs are flying around, and I hated those guys. They're annoying. Other enemy I hated, there's blue ghosts that just kind of fly in random directions, and they cast a spell, and both of those things, like this between the spell and them touching you, they can easily whittle your health down in like no time. Hated fighting those guys. But I think the Blue Knights were the worst. I despised every time I walked into a room and there was a bunch of those guys because I knew it was going to be a long, drawn out affair because, again, you can't attack them from the front and pretty much they're always showing you their front. So it's just a lot of like running around, like trying to get behind them and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's still fun, even though it's sometimes a little frustrating with some of those enemies. You still have fun, and you still feel like when you die, you easily can start over at the beginning of that dungeon, and you try it again, and you try it again, and eventually you get over the hump, and you move on to the next room, the next challenge. That's part of the game. As for the story, there really is no story in this game. At least, like I said, playing it in 2024 without an instruction manual that tells you like who you are, what's going on. If I didn't come into this game with any knowledge about who Zelda is, who Link is, who Ganon is, there's nothing in this game to like indicate any of that for you. You start out outside a cave, a strange old man just kind of mysteriously hanging out there, gives you a crappy sword and says, "Deuces, good luck." And he gives you no direction, no objective, just go. And it works amazing. It really does. Like it's so refreshing. And especially because like a lot of the games I play now, role playing games, or even games like Red Dead Redemption, they're very exposition driven and you're constantly giving quests that says, go here, do that. Even an open world like Skyrim or something, you have the freedom with what you choose to do, but at the same time, at some level, you're just kind of checking off the quests. Like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that to advance my character or the story or whatever. In this game, there you have none of that. There's no record keeping. There's no log of like what you've done and what you still need to do. Like you have to remember. And again, any exposition you're given is kind of like cryptically via the old man or this old woman. They'll give you clues and tell you things like, go find the old man in the graveyard. And so once you figure out where the graveyard is and once you find the old man, then you can see like, what that's about. But nothing in the game retains that. You have to remember that yourself. You have to remember that, oh, that old lady told me to go to the graveyard and find the old man. And if you don't remember that, then I guess you're kind of screwed. I mean, maybe you'll find it through just exploration because that is the game. This game is refreshing in that way, in that it is just the game is the game and there is no real story. You are just kind of wandering around this world looking for dungeons, and within each dungeon, there's going to be a piece of Triforce guarded by an end boss, and you're trying to collect them all, even though you don't know why. You just the game wants you to do it, so you do it, and you're having fun doing it, so you don't really have any problems with it. And then there was this moment where once I had all the pieces of the Triforce, I expected something to happen, like some exposition, like, oh, do this, do that, now you can do this, or whatever, like, this is where you need to go. There's none of that. So, for probably 2 or 3 hours after I had collected all the pieces of the Triforce, I just wandered around the world trying to figure out what to do next. Like, where do I go? Like, the game isn't over. I haven't saved Zelda, which again, nothing in the game tells you anything about Zelda, like that she's being held hostage, that you need to rescue her. The game is called The Legend of Zelda, but nothing in the game ever brings her up, mentions her. So you're just wandering around doing your thing. Yeah, eventually I figured out through exploration and studying some of the clues in the game, I figured out where to go, and through chance, happenstance, whatever, I finally figured out where this last dungeon is. And then that was a whole deal because that last dungeon is like twice as big as any other dungeon, and it's full of secrets upon secrets as far as like how do you even traverse the dungeon. And it's a great dungeon, it's a lot of fun, but it's just sort of interesting that this game is so minimalist in terms of story, and it's not lacking at all. The gamer in me, the modern gamer in me, would say, well, if you have a kind of a RPG light game, which is what this is, you need certain things. You need quests, and you need quest givers, and you needed objectives and all these things. And this game has none of that. It's just gameplay with no narrative at all to drive it. The only narrative is you're a guy with a sword, and there's monsters, and there's places to go and explore. And if you want to hear the really cool sound effect that kicks in when you discover secrets, then you got to go find secrets. The only reason I noticed that there was no story is because I've played games in which story is like first and foremost. It's front and center. Like you can't avoid it. Even later Zelda games. Like I was playing Breath of the Wild last Christmas, because I felt like it, and because that's how it goes. There's cutscenes and things that happen that tell you what's going on early on in the game, but at the same time, I felt a little frustrated with them at times because it forces you to stop the play to watch. You're no longer playing; you're watching a story unfold. I don't hate cutscenes. Cutscenes are good, but at the same time, they do get in the way, and the objective becomes about telling a story versus playing a game. And there's all kinds of things you can talk about with that. I will just say, for this game, I didn't miss the story bits at all. And in fact, it was refreshing just to pick up the game and know that the only thing I need to know is I need to figure out where this dungeon is, or I want to try and figure out what do I need to do to get to this heart that I can see in the world. And you just go and you're just running around trying to find things. Or like you can buy this magic shield, and there's a creature in this game that will eat magic shields, and it's super frustrating because magic shields are freaking expensive. I had to replace like 3 or 4 of these stupid shields because mine kept getting eaten. I guess mine must have tasted like Twinkies or something because these monsters would just beeline for me and eat my dang shield. So part of the game for me became like running around trying to find things to kill and to collect coins so that I could buy a new magic shield so that monsters could chase me and try and eat it some more. But you need that magic shield because it does make things easier. But yeah, that became the game. Is like, what do I need to do to progress the game as versus what do I need to do to progress the story? There's a distinction there, and it's not all that subtle. But like I said, coming back to this game, I just loved it. Frankly, I really did. The only real black mark on the face of this game is that Ganon, the end boss, the guy who's holding Zelda hostage. We don't know why he's holding her hostage. Maybe he's got a thing for princesses. Who knows? Game doesn't go there, so I'm not going to. But I will just say he's like the worst end boss of all time. When you show up, he just turns invisible and you just randomly swing your sword around until you hit him and then you kill him. And super anticlimactic. Like I was expecting something epic and awesome because some of the bosses in this game are fun to fight, and he just was not at all. It was very much a letdown. But other than that, that's the only real disappointing thing in this game. I talked at the top about all-time NES games, and this game is certainly on that list. Would I put it above Tecmo Super Bowl now that I've played both? That's a good question, Eric. It's a real good question. I wish I had been prepared for it. I wish I had known you were going to ask me because I would have come with some facts, but I can talk off the top of the dome. I'm going to say no. I'm going to put Tecmo Super Bowl above The Legend of Zelda still. I love both games dearly. They're both in my top 3 NES games. The third spot would probably be Super Mario Brothers 3, but or maybe something like River City Ransom. I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to keep playing Nintendo games until I can fill out my top 10 and then tell you guys definitively like, oh, this game's better than this game. But as it stands, The Legend of Zelda is more iconic than Tecmo Super Bowl. The sounds, the soundtrack, the experience, and the gameplay, it's very refreshing and I love it, but I still think I put Tecmo Super Bowl above it. I think it's the best sports game of all time. You can check out that pod if you want to hear more about what I think about Tecmo Super Bowl. But yeah, I think I'd still put it slightly above this. But clearly, this is one of the greatest video games of all time. Not just Nintendo Entertainment System, but just of all time. I did start playing the sequel to this, which is called Legend of Zelda 2 or something like that. And it's super disappointing because it's not at all the same. The overworld map looks more like something out of early Final Fantasies. And then there's just random encounters that pop up that you can avoid if you want to, but you don't really want to because it's by fighting monsters that you gain more power. And then everything becomes a side-scrolling thing that looks kind of like a Castlevania light. It's clunky. I might still play it, but it feels like a clear miss and a clear step down from this. I might play around with it a little more before I then go to A Link to the Past, which is my favorite Zelda game of all time. We're going to see if it holds up and how it holds up. Speaking specifically about The Legend of Zelda for Nintendo, I really wish more games were like this, and it's a funny thing to say because the technology is always advancing and video games look better than ever. Like last weekend, I was playing FIFA with my brother-in-law, and there was a moment where I was just watching the players run on the field and it just looked so lifelike that it just kind of took my breath away, because as someone who grew up playing video games and has been playing video games all of my life, graphical fidelity was always something that was to be pursued, which is why, a lot of the new, when systems come out, they're always talking about their graphics capability. And one of the selling points with games has always been like, yeah, you want it to look as lifelike as possible. You want it to look real. And like sports games specifically really have turned the corner on that. This game looks nothing like real life. It's 8-bit and it looks a little cheesy at times. I can admit that. But at the same time, I do wish more games were like this, because I just rocked this game for 2 weeks and I beat it and I feel great about it. And I feel accomplished that I did it. Every time I picked up the controller to play this game, I made progress. And it was clear progress, and it wasn't just like Side Quest City where, much like Skyrim, that game's got so many side quests, the game becomes about side quests. And really, that's the point of the game, is just kind of screwing around. This game would just put you in an open world, but there was only, so many dungeons. And you're just exploring and you're finding things. I just really loved it. It was so refreshing playing it again. The game has a purpose, but it lets you discover it as you go. It just plays wonderfully. It has this wonderful retro feel that just feels timeless. Yeah, so if you haven't played this game before, I don't know if I'd recommend it, because, again, I feel like, same thing I said with Tecmo Super Bowl, I feel like you have to have some nostalgia for these games to really appreciate them, because otherwise, I don't know that you can look past the primitive, quote-unquote, primitive graphics and gameplay. I think if you have nostalgia for something, and you tend to look past the ugly warts for what it is, part of that can blind you to what it is. In the case of a game like this, I think nostalgia for it allows me to just look past the gameplay, which is maybe sometimes a little clunky, or the graphics, or the repetitive music, and just enjoy the experience. Some of the enjoyment is the remembrance, and I don't even have strong memories of playing it. I just remember that I played it and loved it. And then again, I'm responding emotionally to the music and the sound effects, because it's just locked away in some part of my brain. So I don't know if I could recommend this strongly if you've never played Nintendo games. But if you have, and certainly if you loved this when you were growing up, I would recommend going back to it now, because it is every bit as fun as you remember. And in fact, I would say, because we've had all these modern takes on games like this, games like Diablo and things like that, I would say it's even more, it makes this experience even better, in my opinion. And the gameplay really does shine. If you have a soft spot for Zelda games, if you've played this in the past, if you have an open mind for retro experiences, I would definitely check it out. It is one of the classics of the genre, of the classic video games period, for a reason. I absolutely loved my time playing it. I would say I love my time in Hyrule, but you have no indication you're in Hyrule. Nothing in this game tells you you're in Hyrule. The only direction you're given is by some old man who mysteriously shows up again and again to offer some sage but cryptic advice, or to give you an upgrade on your sword. And that's basically it. So I do kind of wonder what his deal is. What's his backstory? Why does he keep popping up? Did he used to be a hero and now he's passing on the mantle? There's questions that I naturally think about this kind of thing, and you'll find no answers. He's just Mr. Exposition in a game with minimal exposition, and that's just perfect. So that's it for this episode. Shorter episode this week. Like the game itself, it is what it is. There's not a ton to talk about, but I did love it. I did enjoy playing it again, and I would recommend it. I will be back next week. I'm trying to line up a couple of guests for subsequent episodes. I don't know how the sequencing is going to go, so I can't tease you with anything, but you will have an episode next week, and it will be a banger, because that's how we do it here. In the meantime, I've been Eric Pierce. This has been All the Fanfare. Have a great week. Peace out.